The anime making machine is an efficient one. While shows with quality are abundant, those with more focus on quantity often tend to overshadow, their typical lack of quality earning them derision. And so easy to associate with this is length. Long manga series being stretched out into longer shows, often falling into the trappings of dumb filler or tired padding. There's a good reason this happens. Anime and manga are fundamentally different mediums. A single chapter can only have so many pages due to the harsh work week required to pump one out, while an anime episode must have its length dictated by the broadcast. There's no hard, fast rule for how this must be done, but in looking at the ways the series Hunter x Hunter was adapted into its two TV adaptions, one started in 2011 and one in 1999, the subtle differences can become readily apparent. While there are some as blatant as the color palettes or the amount of information from the first chapter covered in the first episode, instead let's skip ahead to the third phase of the Hunter exam, Trick Tower. In the manga, the arc covered a 72-hour period in 7 chapters, the material making up almost a quarter of the manga at that point. But in both the animated adaptions, the arc is stretched across 5 whole episodes each. In 1999, it's understandable as the material was being stretched out from the beginning, as the manga only started the previous year, so the more time they took in covering the material, the longer they had to put off the show's inevitable death when they reached the end. The Trick Tower arc is still a sizable third of the show at this point if you cut out the episodes with primarily non-canon material. But in 2011, Trick Tower is 40% of the entire show at the point that it ends. It stands to reason that they could have gone through it in only 3 or 4 episodes had they been closer to the rate they had been going at that point. But instead a choice was made to deliberately extend it. The added length becomes especially obvious in the last episode of the arc, where the characters must wait in a side room for 50 hours before being allowed to continue on to the end. In 1999, this is a quick 2-minute scene at the start of the last episode of the arc, containing a few gags while the timer quickly speeds down so things can continue properly. In 2011, this room is taken and stretched out to half the length of the entire last episode. This lengthening of the material doesn't keep it from being interesting or engaging. Each episode has a paradoxical quality to it where not much is happening in each one, making it feel as if it's going slower. Yet thanks to the tension and atmosphere, the episodes still seem to end before I thought they would. And in the side room, when the timer finally did tick down, I felt genuine relief, not realizing how the tension of the group being stuck there for so long had been built up through the lax scenes until it finally released. Even though the material being stretched out is generally the sign of a staggered adaptation, here it's used deliberately because in Trick Tower, time is the most important resource. And in subtly making the audience feel the stretch of time, you're more attuned to their position and struggle against that time. While the penalty room in the 1999 adaptation was a fun distraction, the way in which the 2011 adaptation expands on it only becomes more apparent when you realize that in the manga it was less than a panel. The entire 50-hour wait was explained away in a single narration bubble. But adaptation isn't just about where and what kinds of scenes are added, filler or padding. Take the Zoldyck arc. After a few chapters of build-up, you have Gon and his friends getting deeper into the estate so that they can rescue Killua from his family. And it hits a few beats no doubt familiar if this isn't your first action-adventure series. Gon goes through some training, putting him closer to the level where he might be better served in going through the trials to come, before Killua's mother relays a message from him where he says he's indisposed and won't be able to meet him, set against an image of Killua in chains, the first visual of him in the arc. The implications looking forward are clear, with Gon no doubt wanting to press forward to find Killua no matter what, regardless of the obstacles he's going to face. 2011 leads into this even harder, adding a scene before this in which his mother claims that Gon won't be able to reach him, while Killua persists that he will. The trust and friendship between the two is playing to the audience while the conflict is easy as the family tries to keep them apart, building up to a cathartic, action-packed climax. Except that's not how it unfolds. Instead of playing out the expected, Killua is freed, and after a surprisingly warm conversation with his father, he's allowed to go see his friend with no further resistance from his family. It's a more natural conclusion, and one that stuck with me when I first engaged in the series. The delivery of the message, like Killua's insistence that Gon will definitely reach him, creates an expectation, and having that expectation broken in an interesting way makes the events feel all the more organic. However, before I praise Togashi too much for stopping something early, it's more than just the events that affect the material when adapted. In 1999, the events taking place are panel for panel the same, but while Killua's message serves as the capstone to both chapter and episode in the source material in 2011, in 1999 it's what starts us off in the episode where we first hear it, before we go into Killua being freed. Because the events are placed in the same serial piece of the main work, it should still feel abrupt, perhaps even more so, but instead it comes across as being negligible or even pointless. Setting the scene at the end of the material gives us time to ruminate. Even with the next chapter or episode right at your fingertips, seeing the big panel of Killua hanging with whip marks on his body, or letting the narration consider the importance of the message, allows the audience to think about the implications before making a choice to continue on in the story right away. But there is no break at the start of the 1999 adaptation. Having the message delivered right at the start of the episode implies that it's going to be built on throughout. But with it instead being tossed out immediately, it begs the question of why it happened in the first place. Each chapter or episode is going to have its own arc of tension and release to it, but the placement of this event builds tension with no release. In 2011 in the manga, it happens after Gon's battle of wills with Kanari, her resolve breaking until she begs Gon to help Killua before being attacked, Killua's mother giving them the message. It throws the result of the whole conflict into question, as Kanari's weakened allegiance and the pain Gon had to put himself through risk becoming meaningless, begging a follow-up and using this as incentive to move on to the next episode or chapter. Yet in 1999, the episode ends as Kanari is attacked, leaving the audience to wonder why, but with no real clue as to how this might be significant. And when the situation is expanded on the next episode, it's just as quickly swept aside. And the 2011 adaptation absolutely makes this conscious choice, as it expanded on a single cover page interaction between Killua and Kanari to cover half the episode, weakening the abruptness but allowing both this episode and the previous one to start and end exactly where they needed to for their respective purposes. There's a lot to consider when adapting a work to another medium, because even the smallest of changes matter. Adding filler or rearranging the events can be necessary to allow the material to fit into the new medium, and it's up to the staff of the adaptation to make sure it contributes to the narrative rather than detracts from it, because every change is by definition transformative. And understanding why the changes are being done and what effect they have on the material can prevent the dismissiveness that often accompanies such discussions. This video was made with the support of my patrons such as Volkion and MathWiz97, and your support would be appreciated as well. You can lend a hand at patreon.com/Craftsdwarf or by sharing this video to interested parties. And thank you for watching.